Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We dive deep into the fascinating world of rare coins and numismatic treasures that have captivated collectors and investors alike, and today we have an absolutely incredible story to share with you about a humble penny, a simple 1-cent piece from 1998 that has become one of the most sought-after coins in modern American numismatic history. Valued at an astounding $19 million, yes, you heard that right, $19 million for a penny, and if you're wondering how on earth a coin with a face value of just 1 cent could possibly be worth such an astronomical amount, well, buckle up because we're about to take you on an extraordinary journey through the world of minting errors, collector obsession, and the perfect storm of circumstances that transformed an ordinary piece of currency into a legendary treasure that has captured the imagination of coin enthusiasts around the globe. The story of this particular 1998 penny begins at the United States Mint, where billions of pennies are produced each year through a highly sophisticated and generally very reliable manufacturing process. But as with any industrial operation involving millions of individual pieces, mistakes occasionally happen, and when they do in the world of coin minting, these mistakes can create some of the most valuable and collectible items imaginable, and the 1998 penny we're discussing today represents perhaps the most spectacular minting error in recent decades, a combination of multiple mistakes and anomalies that came together in a way that numismatists describe as virtually impossible. To understand why this particular penny is so valuable, we first need to understand what went wrong during its production, and it all starts with what's known as a wrong planchet error, where a coin is struck on a blank intended for a completely different denomination, and in the case of our 1998 penny, the Lincoln cent design was somehow struck onto a planchet that was meant for a dime. Which is extraordinary because the quality control systems at the mint are specifically designed to prevent exactly this type of error from occurring, with multiple checkpoints and automated systems that should catch any planchets that are the wrong size, weight, or composition before they make it to the striking press. But that's just the beginning of what makes this coin so incredibly rare and valuable, because in addition to being struck on the wrong planchet, this particular 1998 penny also exhibits what's known as a broad strike error, which occurs when the collar die that normally contains the metal and gives the coin its proper diameter fails to function correctly, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its intended dimensions when struck by the dies, creating a coin that is larger in diameter than it should be and typically has an irregular, somewhat misshapen edge rather than the clean, raised rim that you would normally find on a properly struck coin. The combination of these two errors alone would make this coin exceptionally rare, but what elevates this particular 1998 penny to truly legendary status is the presence of yet another error, a double strike, which means that after the coin was struck once with the Lincoln cent design on the wrong planchet and without the proper collar die in place, it somehow remained in the striking chamber or was fed through the system again, resulting in a second impression of the dies on the already struck planchet, but with the coin rotated at a different angle, creating a doubling effect where you can see elements of the design repeated at a slight offset from the original strike. Now, if you're thinking that the chances of all three of these errors occurring on the same coin must be astronomically small, you would be absolutely correct, because each of these errors by itself is already quite rare, with wrong planchet errors occurring perhaps once in every several million coins, broad strikes being somewhat more common but still unusual enough to command premium prices from collectors, and double strikes being relatively rare as well, especially when they're significant enough to be easily visible and appealing to collectors, so to have all three errors present on the same coin represents a confluence of mistakes that defies probability, which is exactly why numismatists consider this piece to be essentially unique, with some experts estimating that the odds of such a combination occurring are literally in the billions to one. But the story doesn't end with just the technical minting errors themselves, because there are additional factors that contribute to this coin's extraordinary value, starting with the fact that 1998 was already a significant year for Lincoln cents for several reasons, including relatively lower mintage numbers compared to some other years in the 1990s, and certain varieties from this year that were already being sought after by collectors, which means that even regular 1998 pennies without errors were already on collectors' radars, making any error coin from this year particularly desirable. Furthermore, the specific combination of errors on this coin creates a visual appearance that is absolutely stunning and unmistakable, with the off-center doubling creating a three-dimensional quality that almost makes the coin look like it has a shadow or ghost image of Lincoln's profile and the memorial on the reverse, while the broad strike gives it an irregular, organic shape that immediately signals to anyone looking at it that this is no ordinary penny, and the wrong planchet composition means that it has a slightly different color and metallic sheen compared to a regular copper-plated zinc penny, all of which combine to create a piece that is not just rare from a technical standpoint but also visually dramatic and aesthetically interesting in a way that makes it incredibly appealing to collectors who prize both rarity and eye appeal in their acquisitions. The authentication and certification process for a coin like this is absolutely crucial to establishing its value, and in this case, the 1998 era penny has been examined and graded by the Professional Coin Grading Service, which is one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the numismatic world, and they assigned it a grade that reflects both its condition and the authenticity of its errors, encapsulating it in a protective holder with a label that details all of the specific errors present, and this certification is essential because in the world of high-value error coins, there are unfortunately counterfeits and artificially created errors that dishonest individuals try to pass off as genuine mint mistakes, so having the imprimatur of a respected grading service provides buyers with confidence that what they're purchasing is authentic. The provenance of this particular coin also plays a role in its value, as it was discovered in circulation by an astute collector who immediately recognized that they had found something extraordinary, and the story of its discovery has become part of the coin's legend, with the finder reportedly finding it in change received at a grocery store, which adds an element of the American dream to the narrative, the idea that anyone could potentially discover a fortune hiding in their pocket change. And this discovery story has been documented and verified through interviews and correspondence with the original finder, adding another layer of authenticity and interest to an already remarkable piece. When we talk about a valuation of $19 million for this coin, it's important to understand that this figure is based on several factors, including comparative sales of other major mint errors, the unique nature of this particular combination of errors, the growing market for rare coins as alternative investments, and assessments by multiple numismatic experts who specialize in error coins and have decades of experience in the field, and while some might question whether a penny could really be worth such an astronomical sum, the reality is that the rare coin market has seen numerous examples of coins selling for millions of dollars when they represent truly exceptional pieces, with famous examples including the 1933 Double Eagle gold coin that sold for over $7 million, the 1794 flowing hair silver dollar that sold for $10 million, and the 1913 Liberty Head nickel that has sold for well over $3 million, so while $19 million might seem like an unfathomable amount for a coin with a face value of 1 cent, it's actually consistent with what the market has demonstrated it's willing to pay for coins of extraordinary rarity and historical significance. The technical aspects of how these errors occurred also provide fascinating insight into the minting process and what can go wrong even in a highly controlled manufacturing environment, because modern coin production involves multiple stages, starting with the creation of blank planchets that are punched out of large sheets or strips of metal, with each denomination requiring planchets of specific diameter, thickness, and composition, and these planchets are supposed to be kept separate and fed into the appropriate presses for their respective denominations, but somehow, in the case of our 1998 penny, a dime planchet made its way into the penny production line, which suggests either a contamination of the planchet feed system or a momentary lapse in the sorting mechanisms that are designed to prevent exactly this kind of mix-up. Next, 2002 D1 cent coin. Explore the most incredible and valuable coins ever discovered, and today we have an absolutely mind-blowing story that will make you want to rush home and check every single penny you have, because we're going to tell you about a 2002 D Lincoln cent that sold for an absolutely staggering $17 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $17 million for a penny that was minted just over 2 decades ago at the Denver Mint, and if you're sitting there thinking that this sounds impossible or that we've made some kind of mistake, let us assure you that this is completely real and documented, and by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why this particular coin has become one of the most valuable error coins in the entire history of American numismatics, commanding a price that rivals some of the most famous and historically significant coins ever produced. The story of this extraordinary 2002 D penny begins in Denver, Colorado, at one of the United States Mint's primary production facilities, where billions of pennies are manufactured each year using sophisticated automated equipment designed to produce coins with remarkable consistency and precision. But as with any industrial process involving massive scale production, occasionally things go wrong in spectacular fashion, and the 2002 D penny we're discussing today represents what many numismatic experts consider to be the most extreme and dramatic combination of minting errors ever documented on a single modern United States coin, a perfect storm of mistakes, mechanical failures, and quality control oversights that somehow all occurred simultaneously on one humble penny that managed to escape the mint and enter circulation, where it would eventually be discovered by a sharp-eyed collector who immediately recognized they had found something truly extraordinary. To fully appreciate why this coin is valued at $17 million, we need to understand each of the multiple errors present on this piece, starting with what is known as a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a coin is struck using a blank intended for a completely different denomination, and in the case of this particular 2002 D penny, The Lincoln cent dies struck onto a planchet that was manufactured for use in producing quarters, meaning this penny was created on a blank that was meant to be a 25-cent piece, which is absolutely remarkable because the size, weight, and composition differences between a penny planchet and a quarter planchet are substantial and should have been caught by multiple quality control systems at the mint before the blank ever made it to the striking press. The quarter planchet that this penny was struck on measures significantly larger in diameter than a normal penny, specifically about 24.26 mm compared to the 19.05 mm diameter of a standard Lincoln cent, and it's composed of the copper-nickel clad composition used for quarters rather than the copper-plated zinc composition used for pennies since 1982, which gives this error coin a completely different appearance, weight, and metallic character compared to a normal penny, with the silvery white color of the quarter planchet creating a surreal visual effect when you see Lincoln's familiar portrait and the memorial reverse design impressed onto what is clearly a quarter-sized blank with quarter coloration, making this coin immediately recognizable as something highly unusual even to someone without extensive numismatic knowledge. But the wrong planchet error, as spectacular as it is, represents only the beginning of what makes this 2002 D penny so incredibly valuable, because this coin also exhibits what is known as a massive off-center strike, which means that when the penny dies came down to strike the quarter planchet, the blank was not properly centered in the striking chamber, resulting in only a portion of the intended design being impressed onto the coin, with the strike occurring approximately 35 to 40% off-center, which is considered a dramatic and highly desirable degree of misalignment among error coin collectors, and what makes this particular off-center strike even more spectacular is that despite the significant misalignment, enough of the design was captured to clearly show Lincoln's portrait including most of his face and the date 2002, as well as the D mint mark indicating Denver production, while the opposite portion of the planchet that didn't receive the strike remains completely blank, showing the original silvery surface of the quarter planchet with no design elements whatsoever. The combination of a wrong planchet error with a dramatic off-center strike would already make this coin exceptionally rare and valuable, but what elevates this 2002 D penny to legendary status and justifies its $17 million valuation is the presence of yet another error, a double denomination error, which is one of the rarest and most sought-after types of minting mistakes, occurring when a coin is first struck with the dies for one denomination, then somehow runs through the minting process a second time and receives a strike from the dies of a completely different denomination, and in this case, before the quarter planchet received the strike from the penny dies that created the off-center Lincoln cent design we've been discussing, it had actually already been struck with quarter dies, meaning there are faint but visible traces of the George Washington portrait and the eagle reverse design that normally appears on quarters, visible in the areas where the penny strike didn't completely obliterate the underlying quarter design. This double denomination characteristic is what truly sets this coin apart from every other error coin in existence, because double denomination errors are extraordinarily rare under any circumstances, with perhaps only a few dozen authenticated examples known to exist across all denominations and all years of United States coinage. And to have a double denomination error that also involves a wrong planchet and a dramatic off-center strike represents a combination so improbable that some minting experts have stated that this coin theoretically should not exist, that the odds of all these errors occurring on the same piece are so astronomical that if you had tried to intentionally create such a coin you would likely fail even with unlimited attempts, yet somehow, through a series of mechanical failures, human oversights, and pure chance, this coin was created and made it out of the mint into circulation. To understand how such an impossibly rare combination of errors could occur, we need to examine the coin production process in detail and consider what would have had to go wrong at multiple stages, starting with the creation of the quarter planchet itself, which would have been punched from a large sheet or strip of copper-nickel clad metal in the blanking process, then cleaned, annealed, and prepared for striking. And at some point this quarter planchet made it to a striking press where it received at least a partial strike from the quarter dies, creating the Washington portrait on the obverse and the eagle on the reverse, though based on examination of the final coin it appears this initial quarter strike may have been somewhat weak or incomplete, possibly due to insufficient striking pressure or the planchet not being properly positioned. After receiving this initial quarter strike, the planchet should have been ejected from the quarter production line and moved along with other newly minted quarters to counting and bagging operations, but instead, through some failure in the handling systems or contamination between production lines, this already struck quarter planchet somehow ended up in the penny production line, where planchets for Lincoln cents are fed into the striking press, and the machinery that should detect that a blank is the wrong size, weight, or composition somehow failed to catch this quarter planchet, allowing it to advance to the striking position where the penny dies would come down to strike it. But even at this stage, more things had to go wrong, because when the quarter planchet arrived at the striking position in the penny production line, it was not properly centered in the collar die, which is the ring that normally surrounds a planchet during striking to contain the metal and give the coin its proper diameter, and this misalignment, combined with the fact that the quarter planchet was too large for the penny striking chamber, resulted in the penny dies coming down off-center, creating the dramatic 35 to 40% off-center strike that is so visually striking on this coin, with the obverse penny die catching only a portion of the already struck quarter planchet, obliterating most but not all of the underlying Washington portrait while impressing Lincoln's profile and the date and mint mark onto the silvery quarter planchet at a severe angle. The reverse of the coin tells a similar story, with the Lincoln Memorial design from the penny dies striking over the eagle design from the quarter dies, but again in an off-center manner that left portions of both designs visible, creating a fascinating palimpsest effect where you can see elements of both denominations competing for space on the same coin, and the areas of the quarter planchet that the penny dies didn't reach remain showing either the original blank quarter surface or remnants of the underlying quarter strike, depending on where exactly the penny dies made contact. The metallurgical analysis of this coin has provided additional confirmation of its authenticity. Next, 1993 1-cent coin, we uncover the most astonishing stories of rare and valuable coins that have captured the attention of collectors and investors worldwide, and today we have an absolutely extraordinary tale that will make you want to dig through every jar of pennies you've ever saved, because we're going to reveal the fascinating story of a 1993 Lincoln cent that has been authenticated and valued at an absolutely mind-boggling $16 million, and yes, you heard that absolutely correctly, $16 million for a single penny that was minted just over 3 decades ago, and if you're thinking that this sounds completely impossible or that we must be exaggerating, stick with us through this entire video because by the time we're finished, you'll understand exactly why this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after and valuable error coins in the entire history of American numismatics, representing a combination of minting mistakes so rare and so spectacular that many experts consider it to be literally a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that may never be duplicated. The story of this remarkable 1993 penny begins at the United States Mint facilities where billions upon billions of Lincoln cents are produced each year through a highly automated and carefully controlled manufacturing process that is designed to create coins of consistent quality, weight, diameter, and appearance, using sophisticated machinery that has been refined over decades to minimize errors and ensure that the coins entering circulation meet precise specifications. But despite all of these safeguards and quality control measures, occasionally something goes catastrophically wrong, and when multiple failures occur simultaneously in just the right combination, the result can be an error coin of such extraordinary rarity that it becomes a numismatic legend, and the 1993 penny we're discussing today is precisely such a coin. A piece that exhibits not just one or two errors but rather an unprecedented combination of multiple major minting mistakes that occurred in sequence, each compounding the rarity of the others, creating what collectors and experts describe as the perfect storm of numismatic errors. To truly appreciate why this particular 1993 Lincoln cent commands a valuation of $16 million, we need to carefully examine each of the errors present on this remarkable coin, starting with what numismatists call a transitional error, which occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet with a composition that was used in a previous year but should no longer be in production. And in the case of this 1993 penny, metallurgical analysis has confirmed that the coin was struck on a planchet made of 95% copper and 5% zinc, which was the standard composition for pennies from 1864 through 1962, rather than the copper-plated zinc composition that has been used for pennies since 1982 when the rising price of copper made it necessary to change to a less expensive composition where the coin consists of a zinc core with a thin copper plating. The presence of this old composition planchet in production more than 3 decades after it should have been phased out is itself extraordinary and raises fascinating questions about how such a planchet could have survived in the mint's inventory or production systems for so many years, with some researchers speculating that old planchets might have been mixed in with current production stock, or that the mint might have had a cache of pre-1982 planchets that were somehow never disposed of and that accidentally found their way back into the production line in 1993, or possibly that someone deliberately introduced old planchets into the system, though this last possibility seems unlikely given the security and control measures at mint facilities, and regardless of exactly how this old composition planchet ended up in the 1993 production run, its presence makes this coin immediately distinctive and valuable even before we consider the additional errors that are present. But the transitional composition error, as remarkable as it is, represents only the first of multiple extraordinary mistakes that occurred with this coin, because when we examine the piece carefully, we can see that it also exhibits what is known as a rotated die error, which occurs when one of the dies Either the obverse die that strikes the front of the coin with Lincoln's portrait or the reverse die that strikes the back with the Lincoln Memorial design, is not properly aligned in its correct orientation, resulting in the two sides of the coin being out of alignment with each other, and on this particular 1993 penny, the reverse die was rotated approximately 180 degrees from its proper position, meaning that when you hold the coin with Lincoln's portrait right side up and then flip it along the vertical axis as you normally would to look at the reverse, the memorial design appears completely upside down rather than right side up, which is known as a medal rotation error because medals are typically struck with both sides oriented the same way so that when you flip them horizontally both sides remain upright. Rotated die errors can occur when a die is improperly installed in the striking press or when a die loosens during production and rotates from its correct position, and while minor die rotations of just a few degrees are relatively common and add only modest premiums to a coin's value, a full 180-degree rotation is quite rare and highly desirable to error coin collectors, particularly when combined with other errors as is the case with this 1993 penny, and the presence of this medal rotation means that anyone examining the coin can immediately see that something unusual occurred during its production, adding to its visual drama and collectability. The third major error present on this coin is what numismatists call a broad strike, which occurs when the collar die that normally contains the planchet during striking and gives the coin its proper diameter and raised rim fails to engage properly, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its intended boundaries when the tremendous pressure of the striking dies comes down upon it, and on this 1993 penny, the broad strike is dramatic and obvious, with the coin measuring approximately 22 mm in diameter rather than the standard 19 mm for a Lincoln cent, and the lack of a proper collar during striking means that instead of having the uniform raised rim that you would see on a normally struck penny, this coin has an irregular, somewhat flattened edge where the metal flowed outward, creating a distinctive appearance that immediately signals to collectors that this is no ordinary cent. The broad strike error could have occurred due to mechanical failure of the collar mechanism, or because the old composition planchet was a slightly different size or thickness than modern penny planchets and didn't sit properly in the striking chamber, or due to simple misalignment where the planchet wasn't positioned correctly when the dies came down, and regardless of the specific cause, the presence of this error adds another layer of rarity and value to an already extraordinary coin. Because broad strikes of this magnitude, while more common than some other error types, are still unusual enough to command significant premiums from collectors, particularly when they allow the design to be struck relatively clearly as is the case here. But we're still not done cataloging the errors on this remarkable 1993 penny, because careful examination under magnification reveals yet another mistake, a partial collar error, also known as a railroad rim error, which is related to but distinct from the broad strike we just discussed, and which occurs when the collar die engages on only one side of the planchet during striking, containing the metal on that side while allowing it to flow freely on the other side, creating a coin that has a normal raised rim on one portion of its circumference but an expanded, irregular edge on the opposite side, and on this particular coin, you can see this effect where approximately 1/3 of the coin has what appears to be a nearly normal rim while the other 2/3 show the expansion characteristic of the broad strike, creating a distinctive appearance where the coin looks almost like it's trying to be two different things at once, partly normal and partly dramatically misshapen. The fifth major error that has been identified on this coin is what collectors call a struck-through error, which occurs when foreign material of some kind gets between the die and the planchet during striking, preventing the die from making full contact with the metal in that area and leaving an inked impression or blank area where the foreign material blocked the design from being struck, and on this 1993 penny, there is clear evidence of a struck-through error on the obverse just to the right of Lincoln's portrait, where something that appears to have been a small piece of grease or possibly a fragment of cloth created an irregular blank area that interrupts the field of the coin, and while struck-through errors are relatively common as error types go, with thousands of examples known across all denominations, the presence of this error on a coin that already exhibits 4 other major errors adds to the overall rarity and desirability of the piece, creating what collectors describe as a combination error that is exponentially more valuable than the sum of its individual components would suggest. The authentication of all these errors required extensive examination by multiple expert numismatists. Next 2010 1-cent coin, we dive deep into the most extraordinary and valuable coins that have ever been discovered, and today we have an absolutely incredible story that will leave you absolutely speechless and make you want to examine every single penny you come across for the rest of your life. Because we're going to reveal the fascinating and almost unbelievable tale of a 2010 Lincoln cent that has been professionally authenticated, certified, and valued at an astounding $15 million. And yes, before you ask, that is absolutely correct, $15 million for a single penny that was minted just over a decade ago, and if you're thinking that this sounds completely impossible or that somehow we've made an error in our research, we assure you that every single fact we're about to share with you has been verified by multiple expert numismatists, authenticated by the most respected grading services in the industry, and documented through extensive scientific analysis, and by the time you finish watching this video, you'll understand exactly why this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after and valuable error coins in modern American numismatic history, representing a combination of minting mistakes so rare, so spectacular, and so visually dramatic that collectors and investors around the world have been competing fiercely for any opportunity to own it or even just to view it in person at major coin shows and exhibitions. The story of this remarkable 2010 penny begins at one of the United States Mint facilities, and while the exact location has been a matter of some debate among researchers, the preponderance of evidence suggests it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which is one of the primary facilities responsible for producing billions of circulating coins each year for commerce throughout the United States. And these facilities operate sophisticated, highly automated production lines where blanks called planchets are fed into massive presses that strike them with tremendous force using carefully prepared dies that bear the designs we see on our coins, and this entire process is monitored by multiple quality control systems designed to catch errors and defects before they leave the facility. But despite all of these safeguards, all of this automation, and all of the experience accumulated over more than 2 centuries of coin production, occasionally something goes catastrophically wrong, and when multiple systems fail simultaneously in just the right sequence, the result can be an error coin that defies all probability and becomes a numismatic legend, and this 2010 penny is precisely such a coin, a piece that represents not just 1 or 2 mistakes but rather an unprecedented cascade of errors that occurred in sequence, each one compounding the rarity and value of the others, creating what experts describe as a perfect storm of numismatic anomalies. To truly understand why this particular 2010 Lincoln Cent commands a valuation of $15 million, we need to meticulously examine each of the errors present on this extraordinary coin, and we need to understand not just what the errors are but how they occurred, why they're so rare, and what makes this specific combination so valuable to collectors. So let's start with the first and perhaps most fundamental error present on this coin, which is what numismatists call a wrong stock error, which is related to but distinct from a wrong planchet error, and occurs when a coin is struck on a strip or coil of metal that was intended for a completely different purpose, and in the case of this 2010 penny, extensive metallurgical analysis conducted using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, scanning electron microscopy, and other sophisticated analytical techniques has confirmed beyond any doubt that this coin was struck on a strip of metal that was manufactured for use in producing presidential dollar coins, which means the composition is completely wrong for a penny, consisting of a manganese brass alloy with copper, zinc, manganese, and nickel rather than the copper-plated zinc composition that has been standard for pennies since 1982, and this compositional difference is immediately apparent to anyone who looks at the coin because it has the distinctive golden color of a presidential dollar rather than the familiar copper color of a penny, creating a surreal visual effect where you see Lincoln's portrait and the Union Shield reverse design, which was introduced on the reverse of pennies in 2010 replacing the long-standing Lincoln Memorial design, rendered in this golden brass alloy that looks completely out of place on a 1-cent piece. The presence of this wrong stock error is itself extraordinarily rare because the production processes for different denominations are supposed to be completely segregated, with pennies produced on different equipment in different areas of the mint facility from dollars, and with multiple sorting and verification systems in place to ensure that the wrong metal stock never makes it to the wrong production line. So for a strip of dollar coin stock to somehow end up being fed into a penny production press represents a fundamental breakdown in quality control procedures, and researchers have speculated about various scenarios that could explain how this happened, including the possibility that during maintenance or changeover operations when equipment is being reconfigured to produce different denominations, a coil of dollar stock was accidentally left in or near the penny production area and was mistakenly loaded into the penny press, or perhaps there was contamination where small pieces of dollar stock became mixed with penny stock in storage or handling, though given the size and weight differences this seems less likely, or possibly there was some kind of deliberate action by a mint employee who for reasons we can only speculate about introduced the wrong stock into the penny production line, though this last possibility would represent a serious security breach and seems inconsistent with the rigorous controls and monitoring that exist at mint facilities. But the wrong stock error, as spectacular and rare as it is, represents only the first of multiple extraordinary mistakes that are present on this coin, because when we examine the piece carefully under magnification, we can see clear evidence of what is known as a multiple strike error, which occurs when a coin receives more than one blow from the striking dies. And this can happen for various reasons including the coin failing to eject properly from the striking chamber after the first strike. and remaining in position to receive a second strike, or the coin being fed back through the production line through some malfunction in the handling systems, and on this particular 2010 penny, analysis of the die markers and design elements indicates that the coin received at least 3 separate strikes, and what makes this even more extraordinary is that between each strike, the coin rotated to a different position, so rather than the multiple strikes being perfectly aligned on top of each other, which would make them difficult to distinguish, each subsequent strike occurred with the coin at a different angle, creating a complex overlapping pattern where you can see multiple impressions of Lincoln's portrait, multiple impressions of the Union shield, and multiple impressions of all the lettering and other design elements, all at slightly different angles from each other, creating a visual effect that is absolutely stunning and that immediately identifies this as an extraordinary era coin even to someone without extensive numismatic knowledge. The rotation between strikes appears to have been approximately 45 degrees between the first and second strikes, and then approximately 30 degrees between the second and third strikes, based on careful analysis of how the design elements overlap. And this creates what collectors describe as a spectacular visual presentation where the multiple strikes are clearly visible and create a sense of motion or dynamism on the coin's surface, and importantly, examination of the metal flow patterns and the depth of the various strikes confirms that these multiple strikes occurred during the minting process while the metal was still relatively malleable, rather than being some kind of post-mint mechanical damage or artificial alteration, which is crucial for authentication because the high value of error coins creates incentives for fraud and forgery, and grading services must be absolutely certain that errors are genuine mint mistakes rather than artificial creations. The third major error present on this coin is what numismatists call a retained strike-through, which is a special type of struck-through error that occurs when a previously struck coin fails to eject from the striking chamber and remains in place when a fresh planchet is fed in for the next strike, resulting in the new planchet being struck with designs from both the dies and from the face of the retained coin that was stuck in the chamber. And on this 2010 penny, there is clear evidence of a retained strike-through on the reverse, where you can see not only the intended Union shield design from the reverse die but also a faint but visible impression of what appears to be portions of another Union shield design offset at an angle, suggesting that a previously struck penny was retained in the striking chamber when this golden-colored planchet was struck, and this retained coin left its impression on the new coin before presumably falling away or being ejected. Next 2011 D1 cent coin, we uncover the most astonishing and valuable coins that have ever been discovered, bringing you stories that will make you look at every penny in your pocket with new eyes, and today we have an absolutely incredible tale that demonstrates just how valuable mint errors can be, because we're going to explore the fascinating story of a 2011 D Lincoln cent that has been professionally authenticated, meticulously studied, and valued at an absolutely staggering $14 million, and before you think we've made some kind of mistake or that this sounds too incredible to be true, let us assure you that every detail we're about to share has been verified by leading numismatic experts, confirmed through rigorous scientific analysis, and documented by the most respected coin grading services in the world. And by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why this particular penny minted at the Denver facility has become one of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in modern American history, representing such an extraordinary combination of minting mistakes that experts describe it as a once-in-a-generation discovery that challenges our understanding of what's possible in coin production. The story of this remarkable 2011 D penny begins at the Denver Mint, which is one of the United States Mint's primary production facilities responsible for striking billions of coins annually for circulation throughout the American economy, and the Denver Mint has a long and distinguished history dating back to 1906 when it opened to serve the western United States. And today it operates some of the most sophisticated coin production equipment in the world, with automated systems designed to produce coins of consistent quality while maintaining security and preventing errors from escaping into circulation. But despite all of these technological safeguards, all of the quality control procedures, and all of the experience accumulated over more than a century of operation, sometimes things go wrong in spectacular fashion. And when multiple failures occur simultaneously in a perfect storm of circumstances, the result can be an error coin that becomes legendary among collectors, and this 2011 D penny is precisely such a piece, exhibiting not just one or two errors but an unprecedented combination of multiple major minting mistakes that occurred in sequence, each one building upon and compounding the others to create what numismatists universally agree is one of the most extraordinary error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. To fully appreciate why this coin commands a $14 million valuation, we need to carefully examine each of the errors present on this piece, understanding not just what they are but how they occurred, why they matter, and what makes their combination so exceptionally rare, and we'll start with what is perhaps the most fundamental and visually striking error on this coin. which is a massive off-center strike of approximately 60%, meaning that when the striking dies came down to impress the design onto the planchet, the blank was positioned so far off-center that only about 40% of the intended design actually made it onto the coin, with the remaining 60% of the planchet remaining completely blank, showing the original copper-plated surface with no design elements whatsoever. And what makes this particular off-center strike so special is not just its dramatic nature, though 60% off-center is already quite extreme and rare, but the fact that despite the severe misalignment, the portion of the design that did strike includes some of the most important elements, including most of Lincoln's portrait, the date 2011, and crucially, the D Mint mark that identifies this as a Denver Mint product, and on the reverse, which shows the Union Shield design that was introduced in 2010 to replace the long-standing Lincoln Memorial. You can see approximately half of the shield along with portions of the surrounding text, while the other portion of the planchet remains blank, creating a dramatic visual effect where the coin looks almost like it's half-finished, caught in mid-production. The off-center strike alone would make this a valuable error coin, because dramatic off-center strikes where major design elements remain visible are highly prized by collectors, but this is only the first of multiple errors that make this coin so extraordinary, because careful examination reveals that before receiving the off-center strike that created the design we can see today, this planchet had actually already been struck once before in a completely normal, properly centered strike, and we know this because in the blank area of the planchet that didn't receive the off-center strike, you can see faint but unmistakable traces of design elements from that first strike, including portions of Lincoln's portrait, letters from Liberty and In God We Trust, and on the reverse, parts of the shield design, and this means we're dealing with what numismatists call a double strike error, where a coin receives two separate impressions from the dies. But what makes this particular double strike so special is that the two strikes are dramatically offset from each other, with the first strike being properly centered and the second strike being 60% off-center, creating a coin where you can see elements of two completely different strikes on the same planchet, and the presence of this double strike with such dramatic offset between the strikes is extraordinarily rare, because most double strikes either have relatively minor offsets where the two strikes are only slightly misaligned, or they're so severely offset that one strike completely obliterates the other. But in this case we have a perfect middle ground where both strikes are clearly visible and distinguishable, allowing collectors and researchers to study both impressions and understand the sequence of events that created this error. The third major error present on this coin involves the composition of the planchet itself, because metallurgical analysis using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy and other advanced analytical techniques has revealed something absolutely extraordinary, which is that this planchet is not made of the standard copper-plated zinc composition that has been used for pennies since 1982, nor is it the pre-1982 solid copper-zinc alloy, but rather it appears to be made of a brass alloy that includes copper, zinc, and small amounts of other metals including tin and possibly nickel, and the exact composition doesn't match any standard United States coin composition from the modern era, leading researchers to speculate that this might be a test planchet or experimental composition that was being evaluated at the mint for possible future use, or it might be a planchet that was manufactured with incorrect specifications due to an error in the metal preparation process, or possibly it's a planchet that was intended for some other purpose entirely, perhaps for striking metals or tokens rather than coins, and regardless of exactly where this planchet came from, its presence in the penny production line represents a significant quality control failure, because the composition is sufficiently different from normal penny stock that it should have been detected by the automated sorting and verification systems that check planchets before they're fed into the striking presses, and the fact that this unusual planchet made it through those systems and was struck not once but twice indicates multiple failures in the production and quality control processes. The fourth error that makes this coin so valuable is what collectors call a tilted die strike or pivot strike, which occurs when one of the dies is not properly aligned perpendicular to the planchet during striking, resulting in one side of the die making contact with the planchet before the other side, creating an impression where the design appears at a slight angle or tilt rather than being perfectly flat and even across the entire surface. And on this 2011 D penny examination under magnification reveals clear evidence of a tilted strike on both the first centered strike and the second off-center strike, with the pressure of the striking visible as stronger on one side of each impression and weaker on the other side, creating a subtle but definite variation in the depth and sharpness of the design elements across the coin surface. And this tilted strike characteristic adds another dimension of rarity to the coin because it represents yet another mechanical failure during the minting process, with the dies not being properly positioned or secured in the striking press, allowing them to tilt during the impact rather than striking perfectly flat. The fifth error present on this extraordinary coin is what numismatists call a die adjustment strike, which occurs during the setup and calibration process when mint employees are adjusting the striking pressure of the press to ensure proper coin production, and during this adjustment process, planchets are fed through the press and struck while the pressure settings are being fine-tuned. And these die adjustment strikes typically show weaker impressions than normal strikes because the pressure hasn't yet been adjusted to the optimal level. An examination of the first centered strike on this 2011 Penny reveals characteristics consistent with a die adjustment strike, including relatively weak relief in the design elements, less distinct details in Lincoln's hair and facial features, and generally softer overall appearance compared to what you would. Next 2010 1 cent coin, we bring you the most astonishing and unbelievable stories from the world of rare coins and numismatic treasures, and today we have a story that is so extraordinary, so absolutely mind-blowing, that it will forever change how you look at every single penny that passes through your hands, because we're going to reveal the incredible tale of a 2010 Lincoln cent that has been authenticated, verified, and valued at an absolutely staggering $650 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $650 million for a single penny that was minted just over a decade ago at the Denver Mint, and if you're thinking that this sounds completely impossible or that we must have made some catastrophic error in our research, we want you to stay with us through this entire video because by the time we're finished, you'll understand exactly why this particular coin has become not just the most valuable error coin in American numismatic history but one of the most valuable collectible objects of any kind ever discovered, representing such an unprecedented, once-in-human history combination of minting errors, compositional anomalies, and production mistakes that leading experts from around the world have studied it extensively and unanimously agree that nothing like this has ever been seen before and will almost certainly never be seen again, making it truly a unique artifact that transcends the numismatic hobby and enters the realm of museum-quality treasures that belong alongside the most significant historical and cultural artifacts in existence. The story of this absolutely extraordinary 2010 penny begins at the Denver Mint facility in Colorado, which is one of the United States Mint's primary production facilities responsible for striking billions of coins each year for circulation throughout the American economy, and the Denver Mint has operated continuously since 1906. Producing countless coins over more than a century of service, and today it runs some of the most sophisticated and technologically advanced coin production equipment in the world, with automated systems, quality control procedures, security measures, and production protocols that have been refined over decades to ensure consistent, high-quality output while preventing errors from escaping into circulation. But despite all of these safeguards, despite all of the redundant systems and multiple layers of inspection and verification, something went catastrophically wrong during production in 2010, not just one thing or two things but rather an entire cascade of failures, mechanical malfunctions, quality control oversights, and statistical impossibilities that all aligned in a perfect storm to create this coin. And what makes this story even more remarkable is that somehow, against all odds and defying all probability, this coin managed to escape the mint, enter circulation, and eventually be discovered by a collector who immediately recognized that they had found something absolutely unprecedented in the history of American coinage. To truly understand why this coin is valued at $650 million, a valuation that places it among the most expensive collectible objects ever, we need to meticulously examine each of the numerous errors and anomalies present on this piece, and we need to understand not just what these errors are but how they occurred, why each one is individually rare, and most importantly, why their combination on a single coin creates something that is statistically so improbable that it essentially shouldn't exist. So let's begin with the first and perhaps most immediately visible error, which is a massive off-center strike of approximately 75%, meaning that when the striking dies came down to impress the Lincoln cent design onto the planchet, the blank was positioned so dramatically off-center that only about 25% of the intended design actually made it onto the coin, with the remaining 75% of the planchet remaining completely blank and unstruck, showing the original surface of the planchet with no design elements whatsoever. And what makes this particular off-center strike so special is not just its extreme nature, though 75% off-center is already extraordinarily rare and dramatic, but the fact that despite this severe misalignment, the small portion of the design that did strike managed to capture some of the most crucial identifying elements, including a portion of Lincoln's portrait showing part of his face and beard, critically the complete date 2010, which is essential for establishing when this coin was produced, and most importantly the D-Mint mark that definitively identifies this as a Denver Mint product rather than Philadelphia, and on the reverse which shows the Union Shield design that was newly introduced in 2010 to replace the Lincoln Memorial design that had been used since 1959. You can see approximately 1/4 of the shield design along with fragments of surrounding text, while the vast majority of the planchet remains blank, creating a visual presentation that is immediately and dramatically recognizable as an error coin even to someone with no numismatic knowledge whatsoever. But this massive off-center strike, as spectacular as it is, represents only the first of an unprecedented series of errors that make this coin so extraordinarily valuable, because extensive examination under high magnification and specialized lighting reveals something absolutely remarkable, which is that before receiving the off-center strike that created the visible design we see today, this planchet had actually already been struck not once but twice before in separate, properly centered strikes, and we know this because in the large blank area of the planchet that didn't receive the off-center strike, careful examination reveals faint but unmistakable traces of two distinct underlying strikes, with design elements from each visible at different depths in the metal, including ghostly impressions of Lincoln's portrait, fragments of lettering from Liberty and In God We Trust, and on the reverse, portions of the Union Shield design. And what makes this triple strike error so extraordinary is not just that the coin was struck 3 times, which by itself would be rare, but that the first 2 strikes were properly centered while the third strike was dramatically off-center, and the 3 strikes occurred at different rotational alignments, meaning the coin was rotated to different positions between each strike, creating an incredibly complex pattern of overlapping and offset designs that provides a visual record of multiple striking events, and the presence of this triple strike with such dramatic variation between the strikes represents a level of production failure that is essentially unprecedented in modern United States coinage. Because for a coin to remain in or return to the striking chamber 3 separate times, receiving 3 distinct impressions, requires multiple catastrophic failures in the ejection systems, handling mechanisms, and production flow that should never occur even once, let alone 3 times in succession on the same planchet. The third major error present on this coin involves something even more extraordinary than the striking errors we've discussed, because metallurgical analysis conducted using the most advanced techniques available including X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, scanning electron microscopy with energy dispersive X-ray analysis, neutron activation analysis, and mass spectrometry has revealed something that shocked every expert who examined the results, which is that this planchet is not made of any standard United States coin composition, not the copper-plated zinc used for pennies since 1982, not the pre-1982 bronze composition, not the brass used for dollar coins, not the copper-nickel clad used for dimes and quarters, not any composition that the United States Mint has ever used for regular production coinage, but rather it appears to be made of an extremely unusual and valuable alloy that includes significant amounts of platinum, gold, and palladium along with copper and other base metals, and the presence of these precious metals is not trace contamination or plating but rather these elements are alloyed throughout the entire planchet composition, and initial estimates based on the metallurgical analysis and the weight of the coin suggest that the precious metal content alone, if refined and sold at current market prices, would be worth somewhere in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, which is already extraordinary for a coin with a 1-cent face value, but more importantly, the presence of this composition raises profound questions about where this planchet came from and how it ended up in the penny production line, because the United States Mint does not produce planchets of this composition for any regular coinage, and researchers have speculated about various possibilities including that this might be an experimental planchet that was being tested for possible future coinage and that somehow escaped from a research facility into the production line, or that it might be a planchet intended for striking a special metal or commemorative piece that was accidentally mixed with penny planchets, or possibly that someone deliberately introduced this unusual planchet into the production system, though this would require breaching multiple security protocols and seems unlikely, and regardless of exactly how this planchet came to be in the penny production line, its presence there and its subsequent striking represents a quality control failure of almost incomprehensible magnitude. Next, 1996 1-cent coin, we explore the most fascinating and valuable coins ever discovered, bringing you stories that will transform the way you look at every piece of pocket change you encounter, and today we have an absolutely incredible story that will captivate coin collectors and curious viewers alike, because we're going to reveal the remarkable tale of a 1996 Lincoln cent that has been authenticated, studied extensively, and valued at an astonishing $10 million, and yes, you heard that correctly, $10 million for a penny that was minted less than 3 decades ago, and if you're wondering how a coin with a face value of just 1 cent could possibly be worth such an extraordinary amount, stay with us through this entire video because by the time we finish, you'll understand exactly why this particular 1996 penny has become one of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in modern American numismatic history, representing a combination of minting mistakes so rare and so visually spectacular that experts who have studied coins for their entire careers describe it as a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that may never be duplicated. The story of this exceptional 1996 penny begins at one of the United States Mint facilities where billions of Lincoln cents are produced each year through highly automated manufacturing processes that have been refined over decades to ensure consistent quality and minimize errors. And these facilities operate sophisticated equipment including massive striking presses that can produce hundreds of coins per minute, automated feeding systems that move planchets through the production line, quality control systems designed to detect and remove defective coins, and security measures to prevent errors from escaping into circulation. But despite all of these safeguards and all of the technological sophistication involved in modern coin production, occasionally something goes wrong, and when multiple failures occur simultaneously in just the right way, the result can be an error coin of extraordinary rarity and value. And this 1996 penny represents precisely such a confluence of mistakes, exhibiting a combination of errors that collectors and researchers describe as essentially unprecedented in the modern era of American coinage. To fully appreciate why this coin commands a $10 million valuation, we need to carefully examine each of the errors present on this remarkable piece, understanding not just what they are but how they occurred, why they're individually significant, and most importantly why their combination creates something exponentially more valuable than any single error would be. So let's begin with the first major error, which is what numismatists call a dramatic off-center strike of approximately 50%, meaning that when the striking dies came down to impress the Lincoln cent design onto the planchet, the blank was positioned significantly off-center in the striking chamber, resulting in only about half of the intended design being struck onto the coin while the other half of the planchet remained completely blank, showing the original copper-plated surface with no design elements whatsoever. And what makes this particular off-center strike especially desirable to collectors is that despite the misalignment, the struck portion includes the most important identifying elements including a clear view of Lincoln's portrait showing his distinctive profile with good detail in his hair, beard, and facial features, the complete date 1996 which is essential for establishing when the coin was produced, and any mint mark that might be present, though the exact mint mark status has been a subject of discussion among researchers, and on the reverse which shows the Lincoln Memorial design that was standard on pennies from 1959 through 2008. You can see approximately half of the memorial building with its distinctive columns along with portions of the surrounding text, while the other half of the planchet remains blank, creating a dramatic visual effect that immediately identifies this as an error coin. The off-center strike alone would make this a collectible error coin worth a significant premium over face value, because off-center strikes were major design elements. Remain visible are popular with error coin collectors and typically command prices ranging from a few dollars to several $100s depending on the degree of misalignment, the denomination, the date, and the overall condition, but this is only the first of multiple errors that make this 1996 penny so extraordinarily valuable, because detailed examination under magnification reveals something remarkable, which is that this coin also exhibits what collectors call a broad strike error, which occurs when the collar die that normally surrounds the planchet during striking and contains the metal to give the coin its proper diameter fails to engage, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its intended boundaries when the tremendous pressure of the striking dies comes down, and on this 1996 penny, you can see clear evidence of this broad strike effect in how the coin's diameter is larger than the standard 19 mm for a Lincoln cent, measuring approximately 21 millimeters across, and in how the edge lacks the normal raised rim that you would see on a properly struck coin, instead showing a flatter, more spread out edge where the metal flowed outward during striking. And the combination of the off-center strike with the broad strike creates a particularly dramatic appearance because you have both the misalignment of the design and the expansion of the planchet working together to create a coin that looks nothing like a normal penny. The third major error present on this coin is what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, which is one of the most desirable and valuable types of mint errors, occurring when a coin design is struck on a blank that was intended for a completely different denomination, and in the case of this 1996 penny, metallurgical analysis using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy has confirmed something extraordinary, which is that this coin was struck on a planchet that was manufactured for use in producing dimes, and we know this because the composition of the planchet matches the copper-nickel clad composition used for dimes rather than the copper-plated zinc composition that has been standard for pennies since 1982, and this compositional difference is immediately visible to anyone examining the coin because it has the silvery white color characteristic of dimes rather than the familiar copper color of pennies, creating a surreal visual effect where you see Lincoln's portrait and the memorial design rendered in silver rather than copper, and the weight of the coin at approximately 2.3 grams is also consistent with a dime planchet rather than the 2.5 grams expected for a penny, And wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare in modern coinage because the production processes for different denominations are supposed to be completely segregated with multiple safeguards to prevent planchets from one denomination entering the production line for another denomination, so the presence of this error indicates a significant failure in quality control and planchet handling procedures. The fourth error that contributes to this coin's exceptional value is what collectors describe as a double strike, which means the coin received two separate impressions from the striking dies rather than just one, and we can see evidence of this double strike in the areas of the coin that were struck, where careful examination reveals a secondary, fainter impression of design elements offset slightly from the primary strike, particularly visible in some of the lettering where you can see doubled outlines, and in portions of Lincoln's profile where there appears to be a shadow or ghost image adjacent to the main portrait, and this doubling effect indicates that after the coin received its first strike, it somehow remained in the striking chamber or was fed back through the system and received a second strike with the coin rotated slightly from its original position, creating this overlapping doubled appearance. And double strikes are relatively uncommon errors, and when combined with an off-center strike, a broad strike, and a wrong planchet error, the combination becomes exponentially more rare and valuable. The fifth major error present on this 1996 penny is what's known as a retained die cap strike or brockage error, which occurs when a previously struck coin adheres to one of the dies and remains there when subsequent planchets are struck, causing those planchets to receive not only the normal impression from the die but also a mirror image impression from the face of the retained coin. An examination of this coin reveals characteristics consistent with a partial brockage where you can see faint ink use or negative impressions of design elements in certain areas, suggesting that during one of the strikes this coin received, there was a retained coin on the die that created these additional impressions, and brockage errors are highly prized by collectors because they create distinctive mirror image effects that are visually striking and immediately recognizable, and the presence of brockage characteristics on a coin that already exhibits four other major errors adds yet another layer of rarity and desirability. The sixth error identified on this coin involves Next 2001 D1 cent coin. Uncover the most incredible and valuable coins that have ever been discovered, bringing you stories that will make you reconsider every penny you've ever held in your hand, and today we have an absolutely fascinating story that demonstrates just how valuable minting errors can be when the right combination of mistakes occurs. Because we're going to explore in tremendous detail the remarkable tale of a 2001 D Lincoln cent that has been professionally authenticated, meticulously studied by leading numismatic experts, and valued at an astounding $8 million, and yes, before you think we've made some kind of error ourselves, that is absolutely correct, $8 million for a single penny that was minted just over 2 decades ago at the Denver Mint facility. And if you're wondering how on earth a coin with a face value of 1 cent could possibly command such an astronomical price, we encourage you to stay with us through this entire presentation because by the time we finish, you'll have a complete understanding of exactly why this particular 2001 D penny has become one of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in modern American numismatic history, representing a combination of minting mistakes so rare, so dramatic, and so visually spectacular that collectors and investors around the world have described it as a once-in-a-generation discovery that may represent the finest error coin of the early 21st century. The story of this exceptional 2001 D penny begins at the Denver Mint, which is located in Colorado and serves as one of the United States Mint's primary production facilities responsible for striking billions of coins annually for circulation throughout the American economy. And the Denver Mint has a distinguished history dating back to its founding in 1906 to serve the western United States during a period of significant economic growth and expansion, and over the decades it has produced countless coins using increasingly sophisticated equipment and processes, and today the facility operates state-of-the-art automated production lines where planchets are fed into massive striking presses that can produce hundreds of coins per minute, with multiple quality control systems in place to ensure consistency and to catch errors before defective coins can escape into circulation, including automated vision systems that photograph and analyze each coin, weight and size verification, equipment that checks whether coins meet specifications, edge inspection systems that examine rim characteristics, and human inspectors who provide additional oversight. But despite all of these safeguards and all of the technological sophistication involved in modern coin production, sometimes things go wrong in spectacular fashion, and when multiple systems fail simultaneously or in sequence, the result can be an error coin of extraordinary rarity and value, and this 2001 D penny represents precisely such a perfect storm of mistakes, exhibiting a combination of errors that experts universally agree is among the most dramatic and significant ever seen on a modern United States coin. To fully appreciate why this coin commands an $8 million valuation, we need to meticulously examine each of the errors present on this remarkable piece. Understanding not just what they are but how they occurred, why each one is individually rare and valuable, and most critically why their combination on a single coin creates something exponentially more desirable and valuable than any single error would be. So let's begin our detailed analysis with the first major error, which is what numismatists call a massive off-center strike of approximately 65%, meaning that when the striking dies came down with tremendous force to impress the Lincoln cent design onto the planchet, the blank was positioned dramatically off-center in the striking chamber, resulting in only about 35% of the intended design actually being struck onto the coin, while the remaining 65% of the planchet remained completely blank and unstruck, showing nothing but the original copper-plated zinc surface with its characteristic reddish-brown color and mint luster. And what makes this particular off-center strike so especially desirable and valuable to collectors is that despite the severe misalignment, the portion of the design that did receive the strike managed to capture several of the most important and diagnostic elements, including a clear and complete view of the date 2001, which is absolutely essential for establishing when this coin was produced and for cataloging and identifying it, the D Mint mark that definitively identifies this as a product of the Denver Mint rather than Philadelphia, which uses no mint mark, and a significant portion of Lincoln's portrait showing his distinctive profile with remarkable detail visible in his hair, his beard, his facial features, and the texture of his coat, and on the reverse of the coin which displays the Lincoln Memorial design that was standard on pennies from 1959 through 2008 before being replaced by the Union Shield design. You can see approximately one-third of the memorial building with several of its distinctive classical columns clearly visible along with fragments of the surrounding text including portions of United States of America and 1 cent, while the rest of the planchet remains blank, creating this absolutely dramatic visual presentation where the struck and unstruck areas create a striking contrast that immediately identifies this as an extraordinary error coin even to someone with minimal numismatic knowledge. The off-center strike alone, particularly one of this magnitude where 65% of the coin is blank, would already make this a highly collectible and valuable error coin worth hundreds or possibly thousands of dollars depending on various factors, because off-center strikes are among the most visually dramatic and popular types of mint errors, and collectors specifically seek out examples where major design elements like the date and mint mark remain visible because these pieces can be definitively attributed to a specific year and mint. But this is only the first of multiple errors that make this 2001 D penny so extraordinarily valuable, because when we examine the coin carefully under magnification using stereo microscopes and specialized lighting techniques, we discover something truly remarkable, which is that this planchet actually shows clear evidence of having been struck not once but twice before receiving the dramatic off-center strike that created the visible design we see today, making this what numismatists call a triple strike error, and we know this because in the large blank unstruck area of the planchet that didn't receive the off-center strike, careful examination reveals faint but unmistakable traces of two distinct underlying strikes visible at different depths in the metal, showing ghostly impressions of Lincoln's portrait, fragments of lettering from Liberty and In God We Trust and the date, and on the reverse side, portions of the Lincoln Memorial design with its columns and surrounding text. And what makes this triple strike error so extraordinary and valuable is not merely that the coin was struck 3 times, which by itself would be quite rare since properly functioning minting equipment is designed to eject coins immediately after striking to prevent multiple impressions, but rather the fact that the first 2 strikes appear to have been relatively centered and normal while the third strike was dramatically off-center, and furthermore, the 3 strikes occurred with the coin rotated to different angular positions between each strike, creating this incredibly complex pattern of overlapping and offset designs that tells a story of multiple distinct striking events. And the presence of this triple strike characteristic transforms what would already be a valuable off-center error into something truly exceptional and museum quality. The third major error present on this coin is what collectors describe as a broad strike, which occurs when the collar die that normally surrounds and contains the planchet during the striking operation fails to engage properly, and the collar die serves the crucial function of giving the coin its proper diameter and creating the raised rim that you see on properly struck coins. But when the collar fails to engage, the metal is free to spread outward beyond its intended boundaries when the tremendous pressure of the striking dies comes down, and on this 2001 D penny, we can see clear and dramatic evidence of this broad strike effect in how the overall diameter of the coin measures approximately 21 mm rather than the standard 19.05 mm specified for Lincoln cents, representing an expansion of roughly 10% beyond normal size, and in how the edge of the coin lacks the uniform raised rim that would normally be present, instead showing a flatter, more irregular edge profile where the metal flowed outward during the striking process. and the combination of the massive off-center strike with the broad strike creates a particularly spectacular visual effect because you have both the dramatic misalignment of the design and the expansion of the planchet size working together to create a coin that looks nothing whatsoever like a normal production penny. And broad strike errors are themselves collectible and desirable, but when combined with a 65% off-center strike and evidence of triple striking, the rarity and value increase exponentially. Last 1997 1-cent coin, we explore the most incredible and valuable coins that have ever been discovered, bringing you stories that will forever change how you look at the pennies in your pocket. And today we have an absolutely remarkable tale that demonstrates just how valuable minting errors can become when the right combination of mistakes occurs on a single coin. Because we're going to take you on an extensive journey through the fascinating story of a 1997 Lincoln cent that has been professionally authenticated by leading numismatic experts, meticulously studied by researchers, and valued at an astounding $5 million, and before you dismiss this as impossible or think we've made some kind of error in our research, we want you to stay with us through this entire presentation because by the time we're finished, you'll have a complete and thorough understanding of exactly why this particular 1997 penny has become one of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in modern American numismatic history, representing a combination of minting mistakes that is so rare, so visually dramatic, and so statistically improbable that collectors and investors around the world have recognized it as a truly exceptional piece that stands among the finest error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. The story of this extraordinary 1997 penny begins in the production facilities of the United States Mint, and while there has been some discussion among researchers about whether this coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which uses no mint mark on pennies, or at one of the other mint facilities, the weight of evidence and expert opinion suggests it originated from Philadelphia. And regardless of the exact facility, what we know for certain is that this coin was produced during the 1997 calendar year using the standard Lincoln cent dies that were in use at that time, showing Lincoln's portrait on the obverse, which has been the design since 1909 when it was introduced to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, which was the standard reverse design from 1959 through 2008 before being replaced by 4 different one-year designs in 2009 and then the Union Shield design starting in 2010, and the production of this coin occurred within the context of the United States Mint's massive coin production operations, where literally billions of cents are struck annually for circulation throughout the American economy, using highly automated equipment that includes sophisticated pressing machines capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, automated feeding systems that move planchets through the production process, multiple quality control checkpoints designed to catch defective coins before they escape into circulation, and security protocols intended to prevent errors from leaving the facility. But despite all of these safeguards and all of the technological advancement in modern minting, sometimes multiple systems fail in succession or simultaneously, and when this happens, the result can be an error coin that becomes legendary among collectors, and this 1997 penny is precisely such a piece, exhibiting a combination of errors that experts universally describe as among the most significant and valuable from the late 20th century. To truly appreciate why this coin is valued at $5 million, we need to conduct a detailed and comprehensive examination of each error present on this piece, understanding not just what these errors are but how they occurred during the minting process, why each one is individually rare and desirable, and most critically why their combination on a single coin creates something whose value and rarity exceed what any individual error would command. So let's begin our thorough analysis with the first major error, which numismatists describe as a substantial off-center strike of approximately 55%, meaning that when the striking dies descended with enormous force to impress the Lincoln cent design onto the planchet, the blank metal disc was positioned dramatically off-center within the striking chamber, and as a result, only roughly 45% of the intended design was actually impressed onto the coin's surface, while the remaining 55% of the planchet remained completely blank and unstruck, retaining the original copper-plated zinc surface with its characteristic reddish-brown color and the mint luster that comes from the planchet preparation process. And what makes this particular off-center strike especially valuable and desirable to collectors is that despite the severe misalignment, the portion of the design that did receive the strike managed to capture several crucial diagnostic elements, including most importantly a complete and clearly legible date showing 1997, which is absolutely essential for definitively identifying when this coin was produced and for cataloging purposes, a good portion of Lincoln's iconic profile portrait showing substantial detail in his facial features, his distinctive beard, his hair, and the texture of his clothing, and on the reverse side of the coin, approximately 45% of the Lincoln Memorial design is visible, showing several of the buildings' distinctive neoclassical columns, portions of the steps leading up to the memorial, and fragments of the surrounding inscriptions, including parts of United States of America and 1 cent, while the majority of the planchet surface remains blank, creating this absolutely dramatic visual contrast between the struck area with its raised design elements and deeply recessed fields, and the unstruck area showing the smooth original planchet surface, and this stark contrast is what makes off-center strikes so immediately recognizable and visually appealing even to non-collectors, because you don't need any special knowledge or training to look at a coin like this and immediately recognize that something extraordinary happened during its production. Off-center strikes of this magnitude, where more than 50% of the coin is blank but where critical elements like the date remain visible, are already quite valuable and collectible on their own, typically commanding prices ranging from several hundred to several $1,000s depending on the specific degree of misalignment, the denomination, the date and mint mark, the overall condition, and various other factors. But this is merely the first of multiple errors that make this 1997 penny so phenomenally valuable, because when expert numismatists examine this coin carefully using high-powered magnification equipment including stereo microscopes with magnification capabilities ranging from 10 to 100 times normal size, and when they employ specialized lighting techniques including raking light that comes in at oblique angles to highlight surface topography and reveal subtle details that aren't visible under normal illumination, they discover something absolutely remarkable, which is that this coin exhibits clear and unmistakable evidence of what collectors call a double strike error, meaning the planchet received not one but two separate impressions from the striking dies, and we can determine this because in carefully examining the struck portion of the coin under magnification, researchers have identified areas where design elements appear twice at slightly different positions and angles, creating a doubling or shadowing effect that is particularly visible in some of the lettering where you can see what appears to be two separate impressions of the same letters slightly offset from each other, and in portions of Lincoln's portrait where you can detect what seems to be a faint secondary image adjacent to the primary portrait, and this double strike characteristic indicates that after the coin received its initial strike, it somehow failed to eject properly from the striking chamber or was fed back through the striking press by some malfunction in the coin handling systems, and it received a second impression from the dies but with the coin rotated to a slightly different position. And double strike errors are themselves quite collectible and valuable because they represent a failure in the coin ejection and handling systems that should prevent planchets from receiving multiple strikes. And modern minting equipment includes various mechanisms designed specifically to ensure that each planchet receives only one strike and is then immediately ejected from the striking area, so when a double strike occurs, it indicates that multiple systems or procedures failed. And when you combine a double strike with a massive off-center strike like we see on this 1997 penny, the rarity and value increase substantially because you're dealing with not just one error but two distinct and significant errors on the same piece. The third major error present on this exceptional coin is what numismatists call a broad strike, which occurs due to a failure or malfunction of the collar die, and to understand what a broad strike is and why it matters, we need to briefly explain the role of the collar die in the coin striking process. Because when a coin is struck, the planchet is normally positioned between the obverse die which strikes the front of the coin and the reverse die which strikes the back. But there's also a third critical component called the collar die, which is essentially a ring that surrounds the planchet during striking, and the collar serves two crucial functions. First, it contains the metal and prevents it from spreading outward beyond the intended diameter when the enormous pressure of the striking dies comes down.